Greetings, Commanders, Cerebrits, and Executors. In this episode, we're going to talk about selection. There are a lot of units and buildings in StarCraft. You need to be able to select them to see what they're doing or to issue orders. The first and simplest way to select something in StarCraft is to move your mouse over it and left-click on it. So if I move my mouse here and I left-click, I select this Marine. Notice that whatever you select, if it belongs to you, will have a little green oval or circle around the bottom of it to show you what you have selected. And this bottom center panel will also show you what you have selected. If you have one thing selected, it'll show a detailed readout. If you have multiple things selected, it'll just have a little picture for each one of them. So I can left-click on this command center and select the command center, or I can left-click on an SCV, or I can left-click on a siege tank. And notice how the green circle appears around whatever I select, so you can always know what you have selected right now. That's enough to select just one unit, but what if we want to select multiple units at a time? The simplest way to do that is to hold down the left mouse button and drag your mouse. If I hold down the left mouse button and I start moving my mouse around, a green box appears. One corner of the green box is where my mouse started, another corner of the green box is where my mouse is right now. I move this box so that it contains all the units I want to select, and only then do I release the left mouse button. And when I release the left mouse button with the box around the units I want, those units are selected. You can see all these Marines have a little green circle around their feet, and there are 6 different Marine pictures in this bottom center panel showing I have 6 Marines selected. I can do that again. I can hold down the left mouse button and I can draw a box around these siege tanks, and I can select all 12 of these siege tanks. If I draw the box around this building, I will select the building. But selection does have a couple of important limits. You can only select more than one thing if those things belong to you. If I move my screen down to the bottom right where we have vision of an enemy Protoss, you can see first, this belongs to an enemy, so there is a circle around its feet when I select it, but it is a red circle, not a green one. I still have a picture in the bottom center showing me what I have selected, but if I hold down my left mouse button, draw a box around these 2 Dragoons, and I release the button, I only select one Dragoon. I can't select multiple enemy units simultaneously. I can only select multiple of my own units. But even when I select multiple of my own units, I can only select up to 12 at a time. There are 20 Marines in this cluster right here. If I hold down my left mouse button, draw a box around the whole cluster, and let go of the mouse button, I've only got 12 Marines in the display down the bottom, and you'll notice not all of the Marines actually have a green circle around their feet, only some of them do. It's effectively random which units you get and which you don't get when you try to select more than 12 units at a time. So for that reason, we generally want to draw small boxes around our units so we can choose exactly which units we're going to select. You can only select up to 12 units at a time. You can only ever select one building at a time. If I draw a box around both these supply depots, I don't select both of the supply depots. I only select one of the depots. We have a few more options for selecting several units. So far, we've seen the drawing a box method, which is useful if we want to select units that are close to each other. But what if we want to select units of the same kind? If I want to select all my SCVs specifically, but not any of my Marines or my siege tanks, I can just double-click on one of these SCVs. Click, and I select all the SCVs in view. And you can see I have 4 SCVs selected in the bottom center. If I double-click on these Marines, then I will select all the Marines that are currently within my screen that I can see at the moment, that I'm looking at. Same deal with siege tanks. If I double-click on this siege tank, I'm going to select all 12 of these siege tanks that I can see at the moment. But double-clicking is subject to the same unit selection restrictions. We can never get more than 12 units selected at a time, no matter what method we use. If I double-click on one of these siege tanks, I have selected only some of these siege tanks that are in my view. I haven't selected this one, I haven't selected this one, I haven't selected this one. So I can still only get up to 12 units, and again, if I try to select all units of a certain kind that are on my screen, and there's more than 12 of them, I'm going to get some of those units and not others, and it's basically random which ones I get. Same deal with Marines. If I double-click on this Marine here, I'll select some of the Marines, but you can see there's a lot of Marines that don't have that green circle around their feet that I haven't selected, because I can only get up to 12. Instead of double-clicking, another way to accomplish the same thing is to hold down the Control key on your keyboard and left-click once. So if I hold Control, and I left-click on this Marine, I select all 6 Marines that are on screen. If I hold down Control and I move my screen so I can't see the other siege tanks, and I left-click on this siege tank, I select all 12 of these siege tanks that were on my screen. If I hold Control and left-click on an SCV, I select all 4 SCVs. So double-clicking and control-clicking do the same thing. Now I can change what I have selected once I have made a selection. I can add and remove units in my selection. To do that, I have to hold down the Shift key on my keyboard. If I want to add units to my selection, I hold down Shift, I'm holding Shift right now, and then I left-click on the new unit I want to add. And then I click on another unit, and I click on another unit. And you'll see, as I click on these units, while I have Shift held down, a green circle appears around each of those units, and they appear on my display in the bottom center. If I didn't have Shift held down, I'm going to release Shift now. If I don't have Shift held down and I just left-click, I just select the thing I clicked on. Same as I did at the beginning of the video. If I want to add to my selection, I need to hold Shift. Hold Shift and left-click, left-click, left-click. So that's really good if you have a specific set of units you want, and they're not necessarily all close together in a cluster that you can easily draw a box around. I could select this tank with a normal left-click, and then hold Shift, and left-click, 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 left-click. And I've built up my own custom selection of units with 6 tanks and 4 Marines. But I can also remove units from the selection, remove individual specific units, and I can do that by, again, holding down Shift, and this time, left-clicking on the units that are in my selection. In fact, as I mouse over these units, you can see this hint that's popping up, which is telling me how to do some of these things. If I Shift and left-click on this one tank here, I now only have 5 tanks in my selection, and this tank got deselected. If I Shift and left-click on this Marine, I now only have 3 Marines in my selection, and this Marine got deselected. So if I Shift left-click on a unit in the game world that I don't have selected, like these Marines, I can add to my selection, but if I Shift and left-click on the unit that I already have selected, in this panel down here, I can deselect them. I can also Shift left-click on units I have selected in the game world to deselect them, like this. Shift left-click to deselect those 2 siege tanks. Once I have this panel, as this display here is also telling us, I can also left-click on just one of these units without having Shift or Control held down, and I will select that specific unit. So if I click on one of these tanks, I now have only that one tank selected. And you can see there's still a green circle around this tank, but not around any of the other tanks. Or again, if I select a lot of units, if I hold down Control and I left-click on one of these units that's in this display panel down the bottom center, I will select all the units of that type that are within the selection I currently have. So that's not going to do anything when I already have only 12 siege tanks selected. But let's say I have 4 Marines, 3 siege tanks, and again I'm holding down Shift while I select these 3 siege tanks to add them to my selection rather than have that new selection of 3 siege tanks overwrite my existing selection. And again, I hold down Shift, I hold down my left mouse button, I draw a box, I select these 4 SCVs, and now I have a custom selection of 4 Marines, 3 tanks, and 4 SCVs. If I just Control-click on the SCVs that are in this display down here, just as if I'd Control-clicked on the SCVs in the game world, Control-click, I will select all the SCVs that were in my selection, but I will not select anything else. Just to demonstrate that, let's get that same selection back. If I Control-click on these Marines, I select the 4 Marines that were in my selection already. So I only select units of the type I control clicked on, but I do not select the units that were in my view screen, because these 2 Marines never got selected. I only select all the Marines of the ones that were in my selection already. So you have a lot of options for manipulating the contents of your selection. If you left click, or if you hold down your left mouse button, draw a box, and release on empty space, you do not deselect what you had selected already, you just keep your existing selection. The only real way of deselecting in StarCraft is for the unit you have selected to be destroyed or to cease to exist in some way. And you generally don't need to deselect in StarCraft. There really aren't disadvantages to having a unit selected. If you don't want that unit to have orders issued to it, just don't issue it orders. You might have noticed that when I draw a box around these siege tanks and these barracks, I'm only selecting the siege tanks. I'm not selecting the barracks. And you might remember I mentioned earlier, you can only select one building at a time. So I can select one barracks. If I hold down shift and I left click on the other barracks, nothing happens. I don't get that barracks added to my selection. I can't select more than one building at a time. Same as I cannot select more than 12 units at a time. But when I draw a box and there's both units and buildings within that space, the units are what get prioritized. So that is everything I have to say about selection, your different options for selecting units and changing your selection of units.